All right, so we're here at the World Youth Festival, and there's a special exhibit room about NATO and the origins of the NATO alliance, how it was formed, kind of to finish the work that the Nazis were doing and trying to destroy Russia. A lot of interesting themes here, so we're just going to walk through this. A fascinating display, a lot of different items on display, a lot of different artwork and artifacts, etc. So we're just going to take a walk through the festival, through this area. Here we have a history of deception, a history of evil. NATO is the largest military, political, and intelligence alliance under the leadership of the United States, created 75 years ago, 1949, to, quote, contain the Soviet Union, the North Atlantic Alliance. After the collapse of the USSR, not only did it not cease to exist, very important point, but it also increased the number of participants from 16 to 31, which they promised would not happen, right? They said that NATO would never move an inch eastward, but yet it continued to move. Let's see what else they've got in here. A lot of interesting stuff. Now, this here kind of documents America's support for the Euromaidan riots that overthrew the democratically elected president of Ukraine. This is some of the weaponry that was used by the forces that violently toppled Viktor Yanukovych in the 2014 Euromaidan coup. Just wild. These are actual weapons. Can you imagine this, right? Here in the United States, or in the United States, people get angry about the fact that, there's bots and memes allegedly from Russia. Can you imagine if people in the United States were being armed with weapons like this to attack police officers, to attack people, to destroy public property? I mean, you talk about foreign meddling. This is what the United States was arming people with in order to overthrow the Ukrainian government. Absolutely crazy. But some other highlights we'll talk about. Over here, this is a U.S. supplied weapon, that has been provided to Ukrainian forces by the United States. It's an anti-tank missile system. This is, instead of feeding Americans, instead of providing jobs and healthcare and education in the United States, this is where our tax money is going, to have these kind of sophisticated weapons to prolong the Ukraine conflict. Absolutely insane. This is an actual U.S.-created weapon that was supplied to the Ukrainian military by our tax money. Absolutely crazy. Some Soviet artwork about NATO, about how NATO's always been a military alliance. It's not defensive, but offensive, right? NATO was behind the destruction of Libya. Libya used to be the most prosperous country on the African continent, and then it was NATO that bombed and destroyed it. Now people are fleeing Libya, trying to get out, drowning in the Mediterranean. NATO's never been a defensive alliance. It's always been offensive. It's about attacking independent countries like Russia or China or Iran or Venezuela. Any country that breaks out of the Atlanticist Western system gets targeted. Look at that photo. Right? There we have the President of the United States, Franklin Roosevelt, who I think was the greatest president we ever had. We have Winston Churchill, the leader of Britain, and then we have Joseph Stalin, the leader of the Soviet Union. They were together, standing together to defeat the Nazis. A great moment in our history. You notice every time in American history where we're on the right side, America and Russia are friends. During the American Revolution, the Russians were on our side to fight against the British Empire. During the Civil War, Russia sent its navy to New York City's harbors to support Abraham Lincoln. And during the fight against fascism, we Americans, we were friendly with the Soviet Union. They've tried to erase that history. A lot of Americans think that the Soviet Union was on the other side. They've forgotten that the Soviet Union took Berlin, that the Soviet Union liberated Auschwitz concentration camp. The people of the Soviet Union and the American people were friends and allies to defeat the Nazis during the war, and they've totally tried to erase that history. But here we have it on display. And then, of course, we have the crimes of the Japanese imperialists who were in an alliance with the Germans, and that there's a real continuity between what the Nazis were doing during World War II and what NATO is doing. People forget that the alliance between Japan and Italy and Germany. What was it called? It was called the Anti-Comintern Pact. It was the anti-Soviet pact, right? And NATO is basically the Anti-Comintern Pact Part 2. A lot of great history on display here. And you see some of the horrendous propaganda of the Nazis, what they did, how they justified their genocidal crimes in the name of fighting Russia and fighting communism, fighting the Soviet Union. It's very, very wild. And then we have, of course, the formation of NATO to keep the Soviet Union out of Europe. Insanity. Wow, well, that's a lot of beautiful stuff, important stuff that people need to hear about here at the festival.